Welcome to a special edition of the Inside Carolina Coast to Coast podcast. You will notice I am not Joey Powell, but we are still sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. Sean Moran, Sherrell McMillan join me, Ian Jackson to the transfer portal. Sean, since you were in here first, I'll come to you first. I don't know how to react, so I'll let you set the table for us.
Well, just yesterday on the Coast to Coast, we were talking about Ian Jackson and Drake Powell, and talking about where they might slot in the draft. So in my mind, he was really a one and done, and he was going to be going to the draft. And even though he had slipped towards the end of the year, that his goal was to go to the NBA, and even if it was a second round grade, that he would be going. So to see the transfer portal news to me personally was shocking. I think as we go over the years, it probably will be lessened where pretty much each player is on a one year contract. But when you have a guy that committed in January of 2023, so over two years ago, played one season, for a freshman, I know he struggled at the end, and there were the defensive concerns, but offensively, was a fire plug in terms of close to 40% from three. The 15 plus games of scoring explosions he had throughout the year. Pretty disappointing that you'll most likely see him in college as a sophomore, and it won't be at UNC, where ideally you could benefit from what he learned his first year and now be able to get it his second season.
Yeah, you said it best there. Seeing him in college next year based off of his progression this year is going to be tough for North Carolina fans if in fact that pans out to be that way. And it sounds like it. Sherrell, just sort of timeline it here. I mean, it is surprising news, I think, to the North Carolina fan base. Shout out to 310 people in the room at 412 on a Monday. Sherrell, your thoughts here on Ian Jackson initially?
Well, I'm just going to say this isn't really live. I'm joking. I'm joking, everybody.
It's not true, World. Yeah,
I'm joking.
Yeah, we recorded this a month ago.
For anyone who may be watching at my place of employment, this is not live. So I would say, Ian Jackson not being at Carolina next year is not surprising, like Sean said. I think him going to another school is somewhat surprising. Not everything that we had heard, but most of what we had heard, that the likely plan was to kind of go pro. And I think what that says is that, when two sides, we always talk about it, alignment in salary and alignment in role are usually the two things that determine whether or not a player will enter the portal. And I can't say that we have any fresh new information on this, but if I had to guess, salary and role alignment would be the two reasons that he's not there. And it is a little, I get it from a UNC fan perspective, even if the UNC coaches were, saw this coming and they've been planning for it. It is a little frustrating for the fan base, I would say, because this was the guy, alongside Elliot Cadeau and Drake Powell. That was the class who was going to kind of bring UNC back to prominence. And pending Drake Powell's, NBA decision, they would have gotten 4 years combined out of those three. And that's different from what UNC's used to. And I think if he had gone pro, then no one would really say anything. They might be disappointed, but they wouldn't really be this particularly frustrated because he'd be coming in, do his thing, and then getting out. But him going to another school is what's gonna, I think, really frustrate the fan base. And it's fresh news. Again, I was more prepared to do Ian Jackson enters the NBA draft, is not going to retain his eligibility, more so than him entering the portal. What I will say, we talked about it on the Coast to Coast podcast, which I guess we need to start doing like every day, because within 24 hours they're out of date. But you can submit your name to the undergraduate advisory committee, and they usually get back to you within 2 weeks, and you can do it the day after your team's season ends. So if you start looking at timelines, perhaps this is happening because he got his UAC grade back and it wasn't quite what he wanted or hoped it would be. And so there had to be a conversation, I would imagine, with Hubert Davis and with the staff. And what came out of that conversation was that, I guess he wanted to move on.
Yeah, great breakdown there. Kids get their draft grade, they don't like it, they can stick around. And like Sherrell says, in this era of NIL, and salaries and all that goes on. It used to be about roles. Now it's about roles and salaries. Sean, your take on the look. You said earlier it's not good. The people in the chat and 616 plus in the chat now. Not a good look for North Carolina on the recruiting front. How does it? And Sherrell, I'll get the same question to you. But how does it look from your vantage point in that aspect? You get a 5-star. He's a one and done kid. Supposedly doesn't end up that way, and he may in fact be playing for another team instead of yours. What's the take
Yeah.
there?
Well, one, I think going back to what Sherrell said, I think in each situation, and it's hard to do it when you don't understand the financial implications and what those discussions are looking like, and whether UNC was at one place and other schools are at a significantly different place. I think that always changes the conversation. But in terms of the look, yeah, it's not great in terms of having two top 10 guys coming in. I think they had various levels of impact. I think UNC as a fan base has seen the challenges of relying on said one and done players, which the Dukes and Kentuckys for the most part have seen the challenges of those through their early tournament losses over the years, outside of some rare classes. So I think it does set UNC back in terms from a recruiting standpoint of, hey, here are these two top 10 guys. One of them, his draft stock decreased in terms of Drake Powell. You can talk about whether or not that was the right spot at the beginning of the year to begin with, but in terms of Ian, here's a guy that's been talked about for 3+ years, and now he's going to another school. So I think that can be used negatively in the recruiting trail, but at the same time, everything is now a transaction, and it's a 1-year transaction at that. But I think for UNC, and maybe we'll get into it, this is exactly the type, in my mind, from an offensive standpoint, who they need next year and who they're looking for in the portal is somebody that can score the electric score and somebody that can get a basket on their own. And now they're still going to have to try to identify that as the point guard or combo guard.
Yeah, stay there because we're going to get to that point here. But Sherrell, your take on the recruiting side of it as well. You've covered it for a long time and agree it's transactional. It's all about money. But is it really? Is it totally about money, or is it about getting guys to the league and all? What's the balance there in recruiting now? And then this Ian Jackson news, and how could that affect North Carolina?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say this as the guy who covers recruiting, but like I'm kind of over high school recruiting as a barometer of like what teams look like, because there's a strong chance that either your guy that you recruit, say from the top 15, he's only going to be there 1 year, or he's going to transfer, and then you're going to go fill in that void with guys from mid majors and other Power Four schools who were top 15 guys or top 20 guys and are transferring. So it's like I don't know, like high school recruiting to me is just it's taken such a backseat to the portal, because why would I ever, you know, if I don't, unless it's a really, really special talent, why would I ever like rely on a high school kid for my job when I can go get someone who's been trained, developed, and worked with college coaches for 2 or 3 or 4 years? Sure, it hurts for high school recruiting. I think my question would be like, does it matter? Because high school recruiting has been so diminished over the last 5 years. But yeah, for certain, it hurts with high school recruiting because they've, kids these days, it sounds very old, but these kids have grown up watching guys like Elliot Cadeau and Ian Jackson, on TikTok and for Overtime Elite and on Instagram pages and Reels and all that stuff. And so they see them and then they go off to school and they're not quite what they thought they were going to be for whatever reason you want. It could be Ian Jackson's fault. It could be Carolina's fault. Usually it's in the middle. But whatever the reason, they see that and they say, well, I don't know if I want to go to Carolina because look what happened to my guy Ian or my guy Elliot. So it is a problem. I think my retort would be, does it matter from a high school perspective? And does it matter for this particular staff? Because, it not to be redundant, but it is a make or break year. So if it's a break, then there'll be a new staff and they will kind of go about their business and they won't have some of the holdover information from previous staff. So it'll be like brand new. So I think for this particular season, which is what everybody has to focus on, like it's not a huge deal. But for the long term review of Carolina, yes, I think it's a big deal.
And you do have Caleb Wilson lined up, so once again, if he has a great year, then all this is probably forgotten. But that's also a big if.
Yeah, so Sherrell, just staying with you, and then on your take, Sean. Okay, it doesn't really matter in high school recruiting; kind of is what it is, and it's diminished. But does it matter in portal recruiting? Because guys in the portal still want to get to the league, right? Or is the portal just become all about how much money I can get paid?
You asking me?
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say it's. I don't want to give a percentage, but money is the most important thing. I mean, other stuff does matter. It is important. It could be a differentiator or a tiebreaker, but in the end, most kids are going to the school that's going to pay them the most money. And that sounds reductive, but that's where it is. It is transactional, and that's how things operate. So, if there's a staff who now what the issue could be, if there's a staff that seemingly has an issue with developing players, to get a player who wants to be developed or who is considering other schools, they're probably going to have to pay a premium above market value to get that particular player because of the lack of development. So if Sean Moran is a five-star recruit in the portal, he's the number five, small forward, and he's considering Carolina. Carolina might have to pay a little bit more because he knows kind of what's happened to Ian Jackson and to Elliot Cadeau and some others. So I think that's where it could really hurt him immediately in the portal.
talking with Sean Moran, Sherrell McMillan on a live reaction show, Ian Jackson to the portal, sponsored by Johnny T-shirt. Sean, does it change North Carolina's portal recruiting? Because the expectation he was going to go pro anyway. So folks fretting about that. I think it's a look thing more than, as Sherrell said, an actuality thing. So how does it affect that side of it, if at all?
Well, I think all the conversations have been assuming that Jackson and Powell are not going to be back and looking at the players that can fill in the different spots. So in reality, it doesn't impact anything. Well, I shouldn't say anything. I think once again, this is the type of player that they are going to be trying to find and identify. And maybe it's more of you're only looking for one person, and that's being more of a ball handler that can score, or that the combo guard. But once again, it's another piece of the puzzle that you need to add. It would have been, in my opinion, nice to have this one locked in at UNC, a guy that I think coming into this season was pretty vocal that he'll be the second leading scorer. And I know there's a lot of kind of issues defensively, but I think he could easily get to 15 points at a good percentage next year. And I think that's exactly what UNC is looking for in the portal. So the fact that they had already assumed he was going to be gone is one thing, but in terms of who they're looking for, I think it would have been nice to have somebody like this locked in.
Tommy, let me jump in too.
Yeah.
Nobody should either like start deflecting and saying, well, it's not a huge loss because Ian Jackson didn't do this or didn't do that. Like, he had one of the better scoring seasons for a freshman that we've seen in some time. He shot 39.5%, which we've been tracking the whole year. That's basically like the third or fourth best season from a three-point perspective that a Carolina freshman has ever had, especially considering the volume he had. And then I think he had 7 or 8 games where he scored 20 or more points, which is one of the, I think it's 5 best. Like Cole Anthony, Tyler Hansborough, and a couple of others are the only ones who had more. So let's not diminish the fact that like he did some pretty wild things for UNC, things that really have only been done a couple of times over the last 25, 30 years. I think, however, there were some deficiencies that is okay to acknowledge. Like, you can do both. But all things considered, when you have a talented player already on your roster, you would kind of like to keep them, but you have to understand that the reality is you can't keep them all.
Indeed, Ian Jackson goes. Carolina's got a lot of building to do. So I'll ask you, Sean. I know you guys talked about it just yesterday on the Coast to Coast, and I'm sure 99.9% of the people watching this have watched that too. And if you haven't, go check it out. It's an amazing content from these guys. Like Sherrell said, it should be daily. So I guess this is our daily dose of the Coast to Coast. Sean, what's next for North Carolina? Still got to have a point guard. Still got to have some scoring. Obviously, Vasar and Powell have joined in. The weight is on for Drake Powell. So what happens over the next few days for North Carolina, you think?
I think the continued focus on the point guard situation, first and foremost, of trying to lock that in. If it is a 1-2, all the better. If it is 2 players, but right now, we talked about it yesterday. The guard spot extremely extremely weak and lacking right now. You have potentially Trimble and two freshmen. So 3-point shooting, you're missing across the board. You're missing explosiveness, which at times during the season, especially as RJ was struggling and trying to get going, Ian was the only one that I thought was competing at that top level against the Florida and Alabama, et cetera, UCLA in that December January timeframe. So you're really missing stability, explosiveness, outside shooting, and you look at all the guards in the Final Four, or going into this championship game tonight, and they're athletic, they can shoot. So there's a there's a lot that UNC needs right now. I think they're stable at the 4 and 5, could be stable at the 3 through 5 pretty soon, but it's that 1 and 2 that to me is concerning right now.
My, how it flips when it was all about the centers and the big men for the last couple of years. Sherrell, wrap us up here. North Carolina's needs are heavy. Ian Jackson doesn't really affect that. As we've talked about, it affects the look, the quote unquote look of the program. But the next few days for you, and how many does North Carolina need? I mean, it feels like 5 or 6. I don't think it would be that though.
Yeah, it's something. They need a lot of help. I mean, Sean was basically just like, yeah, they need everything. I mean, it's true. I mean, they need additional shooting. They're going to have guys who take leaps. They need a couple more bodies in the backcourt. They're pending Drake Powell's decision. They're going to need help on the wing. So there's a lot of work to do for UNC. They achieved their primary objective with getting Basar over from Arizona. They've added a wing piece in Powell, but that's not enough. You've lost Cadeau and Jackson and RJ Davis, who I don't have the math, but I'm sure that's like 60% of your scoring, 50% of your scoring, and a lot of your assists between those three guys. Kind of the end of the New York pipeline, it seems, as well with those three guys. But yeah, they've got a lot of work to do, and the portal is open for 2 more weeks. Again, you don't have to make a commitment by when the portal ends. You just have to be in the portal. So theoretically, Tommy Ashley, 5-star guard, could enter the portal on April 21st and make a decision on July 4th if he wanted to. So that's kind of what they're working with. We'll see what they decide. We know there's others they're talking to, but it is there's a lot of work to do for them in the next couple of weeks, and they're going to be judged, by the final product. And I think that's what we're looking for. Personally, I'm not going to look at every player, every up and down, and make an indictment over everything. But I do think it's fair, considering some of the issues that this staff had last year with trying to find a big, that once the roster is mostly wrapped up, which I would say the first step of that is when the portal closes. Once that happens, you can assess and say that's not quite good enough or that's good enough. But right now, there's a lot of work to do, and I think that's the nice way to put it, is that they have a lot of work to do.
Indeed, they do. They got to earn their money and spend some money. Sherrell, you used to say Father's Day or whatever day. When can North Carolina fans watching this, 1,000 folks in the chat watching this, like maybe know who's going to be on the roster for North Carolina next season?
Just wait until November. Honest, no, not even joking. I mean, last year there was player movement almost into September. UNC got a commitment from Ty Claude in August, and then they found out another player wouldn't be on the team this season in September. So, I mean, it could be that long. I think, but we'll have a good feel, I think, of what's going to happen next season in the next month or so, because they can't afford to wait out and wait out and wait out and wait out. They're going to have to just be very decisive. And I think with Powell and with Basar, they were very decisive, and they're going to have to do that moving forward, because the longer it goes, kind of the more the talent thins out, which, just supply and demand increases the prices that you're going to have to pay salary-wise for some of these players. So I would say the quicker you can get it done, but you just have to be very strategic in how you're handling your cap and, sorry, not supposed to say cap, how you're handling your salary pool for players, and then move forward from there. So again, I understand, do not begrudge anyone who is like, what is happening? What are they doing? I understand that point of view, but also I understand the point of view of there's still some time, kind of see what happens. So that's where things stand, and they just I'll say it again, they have a lot of work to do.
Sean, you got anything? Sherrell's always the voice of reason, I've always felt like. You got anything to add before I ask you to a fun question?
And no, nothing else to add. I think Sherrell mentioned the New Jersey New York pipeline, and I think it was enjoyable watching Cadeau for 2 years and Jackson this year. I was always concerned about the New Jersey New York kids in terms of recruiting that. It was never a strong suit for Roy Williams, and to Hewart's credit, he locked some of the guys in, but I think it probably didn't work out to what everyone would have liked from that area. Not saying to close it off. Obviously, RJ was a great player, but I think it didn't. That area did not work out in terms of this stanza for Coach Davis.
Work to do for Coach Davis, Jim Tanner, Ian Jackson to the portal. Who's winning the national championship? Sean, you first.
I'm going with Florida in terms of winning that. I think the size and Clayton will be too much. Obviously, very appreciative for what Houston did. And LJ Cryer is a heck of a guy, but I don't think they're going to have enough offensively to do it twice in a row.
Sherrell, your thoughts? I love the shout out to Houston for what they were able to do. Just a big time ball game.
Yeah, I don't have any analysis, but I'm from the 910 area code, which Kelvin Sampson is as well. So I'm rooting for him. He runs a nice program. They're also a Jumpman program, which I enjoy. But they just have. I'm sure you love them, right, Tommy? Because
absolutely
they
dogs, are my favorite.
They have 24 and 25-year-old, maybe 26-year-old dudes on the team. So they're fun to watch, even though it's not aesthetically pleasing. I just love the way they just kind of play football out there. So I'm secretly rooting for Houston for those reasons.
Yeah, the fact that they were.
But Florida's a better team. I think we can all agree.
Yeah, but It's only who's better at the game time and the 40 minutes. And Houston was able to get that done Saturday night. We'll see if they can get it done. I agree with you. I love Kelvin Sampson. I mean, he's been through it. He's got some stains. We all do. But you got to love a North Carolina guy getting an opportunity.
Think about this. Indiana, basically, he was fired because of extra phone calls. Mm-hmm. Like, think about how antiquated that is when we're talking about salary pools and multi-year contracts, and he got busted for too many phone calls. Like, the world has changed so much in 20 years.
That preach. It's almost like just forget the last 15, from 4 years, 5 years back, anything beyond that doesn't matter. Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran, Coast to Coast Emergency Show, Ian Jackson to the portal, our live reaction. If you didn't catch us all live, it'll be up on the YouTube channel. It'll be up on the podcast channels. Probably even be a transcript on it as well at Inside Carolina. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and shout out to Sean and Sherrell for hopping on, and shout out to the 1,000 folks that joined us live. It's always a pleasure, guys. Thank y'all.